I heard on a podcast I used to listen to, this audio guy. He played guitar and stuff, and they made the point like the AI is actually automating the harder stuff first in a lot of times. So if you can get good at learning simple programs and finding them, then you don't actually need to be like a great musician. Even like Grimes, her, the artist, Elon Musk's wife, ex-wife or whatever, like a daughter named like B3721 or whatever. So she was like part of that generation of people that just learned YouTubing well and became a hit like through like that, much less formal. Like she eventually used some of the best producers in the world, but early, like a lot of those people just used like this kind of cheap software and never went to school, never did the hard work, because the software is for kind of kids almost. Like it's for creative teenagers that want to produce things, which is not like the world I grew up in, and definitely not the world like you and John grew up in. You had to dedicate your life to being a technical master.
Oh, just to use the computer. I learned basic programming in college, and we had to write programs in BASIC.
Yeah, I know basic.
And then when we learned word processing, it was all these key commands, control
Yeah.
F3, and the macros and all this kind of thing, because there was no pull down menus or anything, and you had to remember all these codes. And I loved that. I remember loving that because
Yeah.
you use it a few times and you're going to remember all these different shortcuts and everything,
But point and click, drag and drop is so much simpler, and especially
Yeah.
if you're trying to be a professor or be a teacher and
Even
want to just make content.
the Visual
Yeah.
Basic, you can just drag and drop all these plug-in things and whatnot, Years ago, you had to know calculus to be able to do all that stuff,
I've used Perl, and that's the same thing. You're just typing, and then you do awesome things.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really kind of cool. And if you have that mindset of like, I'm willing to search and then learn, there's so much, like there's a lot of like really complicated open source stuff, but there's also some really simple, and AI is getting better like every 2 months, it feels like now. It's like they went over some curve and they're just getting better and better at making what would have taken like a team of technical experts 50 years ago just like a person. Or it's amazing.
Yeah.
What you can do.
What I'm looking forward to is this, what's called the semantic web. There's confusion about Web 3.0 and semantic web, and sometimes people refer to them as the same thing. But semantic web is so instead of just character strings being recognized as the same, which is what Boolean logic search is.
Right.
Semantic web is where all the linguistic, grammatical, syntactical, and compositional meanings of a term are branched, like full branching grammatical tree structures about the meaning of things. So that, okay, category person, category object, category verb, and like, so all those mappings, and then when they get combined, the grammatical rules on compositional, compositional meaning, combinatorial rules and all that stuff, when that's all built in, then all the data that's already in, like the online universe, gets semantically coded. And then you add AI to it. It's going to be almost like, literally like a mind that's going to go through everything that we already knew and generate tremendous amounts of new
insights
for us. Yeah.
Exactly. Because once it realizes like that's a clue that opens this up, and it can do kind of analogical reasoning.
It's going to
go, oh, water is like life, or water is like thinking, and starts to make these weird
Exactly. And it's going to be these programs that look for patterns and look for meaning, even though, do you know the Chinese room thought experiment?
Searles,
okay. So it won't understand literally, but functionally it will be as if it does understand if we program decompositional slash compositional semantics and
Yeah, yeah.
grammar, that'll be phenomenal. I'm waiting for that to happen. And
It's kind of happening. Have you seen the AI image stuff where you just type in a meaning and it generates images?
oh,
Yeah, like they've done some really good, like Disney, Google, and like a bunch of other independent groups. They use this really clever decomposition method that you mentioned, where they take something and systematically degrade it and learn how it's degrading, and then use that to like infer what Da Vinci means or what panda means. And so then you can type in panda walking an alligator on tiptoes, Da Vinci style, and it takes all of those kind of like genre ideas and generates like 10 images, and they're all unique. They're not made from any one image. They're like these feature extractions of the concepts, and it's so, I mean, you can just make like movies about Jennifer Lopez and Tom Cruise that don't, they're not real, they don't use anything real, but like you can make whole plots. And they're doing that with novels too. Have you ever seen any of the AI novels that are like, they
no.
just feed in text and then it makes like Harry Potter-esque, like, and it's coherent. It's really, I mean, it creates like absurd, creepy, uncanny garbage, but they've gotten so much, the error rate of doing that is so much lower than it used to be, because that's what I was doing more by hand, is like text analysis, and textual reasoning was like way off in the distance even like 3 or 4 years ago. But they've made that leap, and it's these decomposition methods where they just systematically degrade things, and in the degradation kind of learn the essence of it or learn the uniqueness of it.
Yeah.
And then it's awesome. I just got into an open beta and I want to start playing around with it. But um yeah, the image making, and it's already starting to get into 3D modeling and getting into like 3D graphics and things like that. So you could just make like a like your friend Noe could make like a novel of some sci-fi art thing that was really creative, and then just turn his idea into an actual 10-minute movie that looks like it was made by animators, not by like like an autistic 13-year-old or whatever. It's amazing.
This is amazing. When I first went to college, it was 8 years after high school. And I didn't want to go until I knew what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was that kind of work.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought this can be done. And I remember a lot of people at the time were going, no, no, that's imaginative, that. And now it's all
Uh-huh.
happening. But the math at the time was a major obstacle for my education because I hadn't
Yeah.
done math in 8 years or 10 years really. I was out of school for 8 years, but I didn't do math in the 11th and 12th grades. So you could have a choice to do 3 years of math or 3 years of language, or
Uh-huh.
I did the language instead of the math, whatever. So I hadn't done math in like 10 years. And even though I was an effortless A student in
Yeah,
math,
yeah.
after not using that muscle for 10 years, it was taking me like 3 hours a night just to do three homework problems in
Uh-huh.
the next math class, whatever it was, intermediate algebra or whatever the next thing was.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like, this is not coming to me naturally. I need to love what I'm doing and be good at it. And I lost this skill. So, and I love philosophy, so I went in that direction instead. But I figured, okay, cognitive science, philosophy of mind, I'll get on that side of it. Let someone else do the programming.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Well, that's the whole thing, is it's distributed cognition. It's like
yeah,
as
it
long as
all
we
comes
have a
together.
math person and a philosopher, we're fine. It's
Yeah, it all comes together. And I'm actually working on a knowledge program right now with an IT guy
oh,
he's
cool.
a genius. He's done all this work with AI and everything. And so he's doing the architecture and the programming and everything, but I bring in a lot of the insights and ideas
Well, that's what, like, we saw that research in psychology too, where um the best outputs are like, you need someone to bring the subject matter expertise to the programming, because it's still, the programming doesn't know the insights that you've novelly built over your lifetime, and there's so much synergy between the two. And I think that'll always be that way, because just a machine versus a human in a machine, they're what did John call them? Like not competitive, but they're like dynamic.
Um, uh, Not oppositional processing, opponent
Right.
processing.
Opponent processing, yeah, it's like it's a healthy, friendly opponent processing where the machine does the factor analysis and then you judge it or tweak it, and it goes back and forth. And but yeah, it's so amazing that kind of stuff. They have AIs that have replaced 8 full-time TAs with one AI and one TA to kind of mostly monitor the AI and just get
Right.
those corner cases where it can't put the brick in the oblong hole or whatever. And you go, oh, let me help you, robot, and you get the brick machine to fit things in there. Um,
Yeah.
it's exciting. It really is, like the the good potential for AI to automate these highly technical things that would take your whole lifetime to be a master at. Whereas if you can learn it in a week or have someone that masters it and helps 10 people, like they have really good stats AI department at MSU where you could just ask these people a question and they have a postdoc that was like nerding over something most of the day and then answering faculty questions every once in a while. Um, and do like these, I don't know, what program are you guys doing, or what's the knowledge base doing?
It's it's going to be decentralized, blockchain based, AI employing, crowdsourcing, knowledge creation, validation, verification. We want to build up a kind of a version of Wikipedia, Google, Snopes, but that the whole thing is a kind of multiply decentralized. So one of the main motivations is because we're in a misinformation age.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to create some kind of platform where knowledge claims get validated in a decentralized way, in a transparent way, where anybody can go into the blockchain and see if anything's been changed, you know, this sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. My friend Mike was interested in something like that for
Yeah.
like peer review, and how like only 3 people usually review ideas, and it's so bottlenecked if you could actually have it more
Yeah, I think
open
this
and networked.
program, I forget the name of it. There's a company out there, I forget the name of it, where they've got an army of journalists
Uh-huh.
who are validating news claims.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You have experts doing the validation.
Right, right. So
Uh,
we envision, that almost every area of knowledge. I don't know if you ever heard of a program called Calibra.
oh yeah, I have that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I used
Right,
to
it's
use
got
that.
these domain experts who are in charge of little areas of knowledge or whatever. So
Uh-huh.
it's something like that where in every domain eventually we
Yeah,
hope that
yeah.
if this thing takes off, there will be not just experts but anybody who can create knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
who can validate knowledge. People can stake a claim and check it and validate it, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they can win or lose. You can the system. We wanted to set up the system where the tokenomics of it rewards people who generate positive information that's valid and penalizes people who use misinformation, who generate or share misinformation.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome.
Kind of like Amazon sellers or eBay sellers get a good rating, a bad rating. So our
Mm-hmm.
epistemic agents, anybody who uses the system and has a good track record, their rating will go up.
Uh-huh.
And if we have like, okay, 10,000 users with good ratings all say that this is true,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
decentralized, you don't know who to believe anymore. So, but if the DAO, the decentralized autonomous organization,
Uh-huh.
puts its stamp of approval on this claim, then that's different than just Reuters or whatever, or 100 journalists, because journalists are all biased nowadays anyway. So
That's part of the collapse of organizations, because that's really I forget the guy's name, Jerry, forget his last name. He's at UMich. I heard him speak. He makes the case really elegantly that like that's kind of what firms do, is they hold the information of prices, because a price if no one remembers what something's worth, like how to hire someone and pay, or what like goods are worth and things like that, it's anarchy. And it takes a lot of time to figure that stuff out. But if an organization retains the knowledge of things, then it can have a memory that like is so powerful. Because like you're saying, if you don't know who to trust, then you have to do all of this work to figure it out. But if you can like chunk that and kind of put it in a small node, then you can free up all this energy to do really cool things. And knowing the cost of something, I guess in knowledge, the cost is like how bogus it is or how useful and true it is, and having some way to kind of capture that.
So
But
many
that's what firms would do.
so many industries rely on fact checking. They have to pay
Mhm.
lots of money, like in the insurance industry. Oh, is that a flood zone? We don't know. We've had no clients there. So they got to do all this research to find out. But, a big DAO, a big decentralized authority,
Yeah,
there could be people, who have good ratings who say, oh, yeah, I live in that area. That is a flood
right.
zone, this kind of thing. And bam, they can get that information instantly. But then everybody will have ratings, like Uber drivers have ratings.
Yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
has ratings. So we're trying to set up the whole system where it's reliable, usable, user
yeah, yeah,
friendly.
yeah.
You know,
These are valid problems. Yeah, and not doing it like a tyrannical way like China, where you have like
yeah, right. No, it's
your
not like,
food is tied to your rating, and you
yeah,
starve because someone
Black Mirror
docked
episode.
you.
You know that Black Mirror episode where everybody's rating each other? Yeah,
That's they've tried that here. Like it's those kind of things have so far kind of failed to take off. But
yeah.
that's terrifying if you can just get um
No, but what's good about this
uh,
is like anybody who publishes a false claim, a false accusation, or
mhm.
whatever, that becomes part of the indelible record in the
Right, it has a memory. Yeah,
blockchain. It can't be erased, right? And then like when it's invalidated, then it's like, well, politicians could also be held to task. Like you
yeah,
said,
yeah,
45 false things in the last 3 years.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's been invalidated by the Dow, right? By the highest epistemic agency epistemic agent ratings,
Uh-huh.
right? So like it's like universally you've been falsified publicly, right? So this will kind of start to make people have to behave better with their misinformation,
Yeah, even like trolling online, they
right?
started, if you just give a little bit of like, oh, you have to put your picture and your real name, people troll less. Like there has to be some
That's part of it.
disincentive to be a
That's part of it.
scoundrel.
Yeah, that was one of our motivations also. I don't know if you know who the actor Mark Pellegrino is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well,
Why?
he's a friend of mine.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, supernatural, Lucifer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Wow.
So, but he started this project a few years ago. He did a Kickstarter just to raise up enough money to create a kind of advertisement video that he could bring around Hollywood to try to sell a show that he wanted to create.
Uh-huh.
He called it the Guardian Project. It's kind of like cyber version of Guardian Angels. Remember the Guardian Angels, Curtis?
Uh-huh.
Right? So, and you remember that show, that TV show, America's Most Wanted?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right? So he thought this would be for cyber bullies, where if
Hmm.
somebody was a victim of cyberbullying, we'd get them to come on the show, right? We try to hunt down the cyber bullies, try to rehabilitate them, hold them to task, make them accountable, and we want to try to bring awareness to this so that we can change the law and social media that people can't have sock accounts.
Yeah, yeah.
Have sock accounts, that'll cut down on bullying. We want to change the libel laws so that we can go after people, who
People
cancel.
commit suicide for cyberbullying. It's
Right. But
horrible.
also people cancel people and they're never held accountable for,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
ruining people's lives. So he wanted to do this anti-bullying project. And me and my co-host on the podcast that I'm on frequently,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
haven't, we haven't done it in a while because we're both busy working on this knowledge project. But we had him on our show and we talked about his Guardian project and we helped raise money for it so that he reached the Kickstarter goal, right? So that was one of the things that like we thought, how could we help him? And we've been toying around with this knowledge based thing for a long time, but we thought there's a way in which, you know, and know your customer. So like people could only have one identity if they KYC, know your customer, So that was one of the things that he thought, that we suggested. Look, maybe we could create a platform, something like Facebook or Twitter or whatever. It'll be
Yeah.
connected with our knowledge app, though, where you have to be a known entity. We have to have your real identity. You can only have one online identity. You could have an acronym or a nickname.
Right, right. I can be like Peanut Butter Rob if I want
Right,
to.
but if you misbehave, we know who you are, and
Yeah,
we're going to shut you down or put you in purgatory for a while.
yeah.
We thought what we could also do is send you to the Guardian Project, right? So that you could get rehabilitated or something, or make bread
Uh-huh.
and then you get your rights back or whatever. This kind of thing. We're trying to figure out all different kinds of other apps that we could build on top of this one platform. That's just one of the many apps that we have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's a very profitable problem to solve because it is like I'm sure video game companies would be fun to interview because they have like just attracting immaturity, and so but they also need to have a reputation and not have people hate their product, so they would be like very incentivized to
Yeah,
figure out, but they do it mostly I think through like just silencing certain types of language or banning people, and
yeah.
it's kind of crude, but yeah, yeah, it's
Right.
it's
I
Angie's List does that, right? Like they're a reputation based, uh
right, right.
their whole business is just tracking your reputation.
I had a meeting with Nathan and
Some today, yeah.
John, and not today, no, the first meeting I had with what's her name, Bonita Roy and
Uh-huh, yep. I know,
Nikki,
but
when they invited me in to try to help figure out this communities of communities,
yeah, yeah.
how do we move forward and whatnot.
Mhm.
And they were saying, well, we've got all these younger people, right? This looks like we're kind of like the elders, and then there's all these people who follow us is like the next
Mhm.
generation, and a lot of
Yeah,
them
yeah.
are young, a lot of them are very intelligent. They spend a lot of time researching and learning all this stuff, but we need to be able to incentivize them somehow
Mhm.
or another to create this knowledge and grow it and whatnot. And how do we do that and everything? And that's when I mentioned, well, my friends and I are building a knowledge creation and knowledge incentivizing
Mhm.
app so that if somebody creates knowledge, it's kind of like have doctor's knowledge program. So the
Yeah,
doctors
yeah.
use it now. Okay, what are your symptoms? They put it in and the thing tells them what's the likely prognosis, diagnosis or whatever. So like if all these people who hang out on the Discord server and spend hours at a
Mhm.
time, they're doing glossaries for John. They're doing
Yeah, yeah.
all that stuff could be put into this. And then when anybody uses the knowledge you created, they get a little trickle back on their knowledge coin, as we're calling
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So it's like
it.
if
Yeah.
I make
Yeah,
a
it's like
database of all your meditations and then people start using it, I gain popular like power or rank or
right,
whatever.
right, right. So
Yeah.
if you became like you're one of John's documentarians, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if the documentary that you make, if people start using it and citing it or chunks of it or
Then
parts of
I'm more credible in the network.
yeah, your
Right.
value keeps going up, and you
Uh-huh.
might get residuals like money back kind of
Yeah.
thing. We want to set up the tokenomics in such a way that
Mhm.
people's knowledge creation, if it winds up being practical and used by other members of the community,
Right.
then they get rewarded. So, but there'll be a free version of everything, but then there'll be, okay, you get a certain amount when you
Oh
join
yeah.
for free, and then when it runs out, you can watch an ad or you can pay a monthly fee or whatever. So we don't want to
Uh-huh.
exclude anybody. We want it to be
Uh-huh.
universally accessible, but yet there needs to be some kind of money in the system.
And that's important too. Like me and Nathan were talking about that one time. Like the economics are not satanic or whatever. Like these economic things are realities. And if you have all these people trying
Yeah,
to give all their time,
right.
then they do like it'd be great if you could get a grant and have Nathan paid 80 grand a year off a federal grant.
Yeah,
But that's like pipe dreams or whatever, or not very scalable. Whereas if you could find a way to um like Patreon it in some fashion, that'd
yeah,
be awesome. Because people like Nathan are just burning themselves in generating awesome stuff basically for free,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and having to have a job, or even John. Like it'd be great if John could just get $100,000 check from the Dow network and not worry about his financial
That's what we want to do.
resources.
We also
Yeah.
want to be able to get people like John or whoever, and
Mhm.
some people like celebrities like Mark Pellegrino to have some kind
Yeah.
of event where people want to be there, where they could talk to Mark Pellegrino and they'll pay,
Mhm.
$20 to join or whatever it is. And if you've got 100 of them, whatever, that money, that we want to be able to help monetize people who are
Mhm.
knowledge creators in any, or knowledge disseminators or knowledge
Right. Because
creators.
yeah, because there's like there's a good politics model where there's the politician or the person that does the stuff, and then there's below them there's a bigger tier of financial contributors, and then there's the biggest massive tier of people that just vote. And so you want that middle tier and the top tier to be self-sustaining, because you have a person like John, you want to incentivize him to do as much, or you to do as much as possible, or Bonita. And then also the people maybe below that, like me or Christopher or just Daniel, right? To go, oh, that's awesome. Daniel makes like 10 amazing fellowship videos with Guy every 3 months or whatever. Like, let's get that kid a job. And then there's like the people that just are kind of using it, but
Consumers.
that's still part of the critical mass is the users. You need the whole thing,
Yeah,
and finding the way
to
to financially
structure it.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
interesting
there's
problem.
so many different moving pieces in trying to create this organizational structure, the tokenomics, the investment, what's reasonable to get investors to come in and pay for, because we
Hmm.
can't build the whole thing ourselves. If we tried to build the whole thing ourselves, it would take years. So we have a team
I
of
still think someone like Peter Thiel or whatever. That's really what. If you got one person to just push in, $50 million to the
right.
wisdom movement, it would just go like, oh wow, there's 10 real Plato academies in North America now or whatever, in
Yeah,
Germany, and
absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, even our product, we hope by the
yeah.
fourth quarter of this year
Oh,
to be
cool.
able to have enough of it mapped out to bring to venture capitalists or
Wow.
investors or whatever. We've been working on it for a couple of years now,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
but very, very intensely in the last year. So,
Yeah, that's I think the difference is like the quality difference of having someone that's really uh like John's Discord's a great example where it's basically a free platform, but it's never gonna it's the statistics of it producing something like what you're doing are like infinitesimal that would happen. You really need
right.
like dedicated people giving that initial push, and then once there's like a prototype, it can be mimicked or whatever. Um, but yeah, that's awesome that you're doing that. That's really cool.
Yeah, we want to set it up in such a way that anybody like John can just
Just take it and run.
piggyback on it, and
Hmm.
they've got their whole network of people within it that use that as a way to
Hmm.
monetize what's going on there.
That's awesome. Yeah, because otherwise you just have to be like a giant. Like Jonathan Peugeot now has like 150,000 subscribers, and when he does like Q&As, they have like a way to like kind of tip your question up to the top, so people will just throw 10 and 20 and $100 in like a Friday night
Super
just to kind of.
chats, super chats, they call them.
Right, right, exactly. To do that kind of stuff. And it's like it's almost like a gamified, you just watch someone make like $3,000, and there's like, oh, I want to be the $100 donor. I would love for people to like say my name out loud, and a couple people to comment on it. There's a very status oriented like incentive to donate to him. It's not really like, oh, I want my question answered. There's like a huge
Yeah, we
element of that.
want to gamify the whole thing too, and have contests and competitions and
Hmm.
special events like that where people can do this super chat kind of thing with whoever's there. We want to have anybody who's creating knowledge to be able to
Hmm.
give them a platform. And what's good about that is they can't be canceled and it'll go in the blockchain and nobody can ever erase it.
That's the biggest hurdle, right? Is like doing it without an organization, because you could just get a bunch of people like for 10 years, get them into like professorships everywhere and be like, okay, we're going to take all the Daniels we know and just support them while they get PhDs and then help them get jobs. And that would also kind of do what you're trying to do. Um, but that's like a hard thing to do. And there's like an anti-academic feel in this movement. Um, Doing it, like, it's so interesting. It'd be fun to watch people walk away from Rome during its decline. Like, you can see the population of Rome, just as Rome disintegrates, so does the population in Rome. And like, I feel like that's happening now, but like, where are people headed is the real uh
Yeah, one of the curious things to me is all of these businesses that are underemployed right now. Well, where are all those unemployed people?
they're online, right? They're
Right, but how are they sustaining themselves? You know?
Our
Unemployment,
economy is like a carnival right now, Rick.
yeah,
Because
it's crazy.
I've studied economics, and like, there's a Wall Street Journal article I read yesterday, and they're like, I think we're in a recession, but we've never had these indicators. There's like these growths and decays, and
Yeah, it's crazy.
uh like during
Nobody really,
Corona, the world population went up during the pandemic. Like, that's never happened in history.
yeah,
Uh
with all those deaths at the same time.
Right, that's what I mean. Like, we had this global shutdown, and certain sectors were like Amazon, like, boomed,
Oh,
Netflix
of course.
boomed,
Yeah.
like,
Well,
but
that's
that wouldn't have happened in like the 20s. Like, it's very bizarre. It's a whole,
crazy times.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to take a look at it, we haven't publicized it, but I trust you to look at it. You know, if anybody finds it by accident online, they're going to see what we do. We have a
Oh,
website.
cool. Cool.
We have a lot of content up there, um, but it's a work in progress. It's, you know, we're focusing
No.
right now on pitch decks, and on the one hand, you're trying to clean up our pitch deck because soon we're going to have an MVP.
Cool.
We're going to have a mock app that we can use to when we pitch it to venture capitalists. So we want to show them one little thing that we can do. We want to create some kind of like a Twitter client where it reads, you know, you can just click on something that you want, you know, some passage, somebody says something, and you
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
run it through the system and see if it gets validated or invalidated, or if it triggers certain kind of, if there's a contradiction, or what the key terms in it really mean, or you know,
Uh-huh.
we have these different functions that we're trying to build into our first app.
That's awesome.
Minimally viable product, MVP, you know, the first.
Uh-huh. Like those song listeners where you could like listen to a song that was being played,
Oh
and it
yeah,
would tell you what the name of the
yeah,
song was. It's
right. So
like,
yeah, we
is
want to
this true? And it's like, beep boop bop boop, 42% likely to be false or whatever.
right, exactly,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So that's our
Mm.
first thing that we're working on developing that. And we've got a team of developers who we gave them all of our requirements, you know,
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
want to build and everything. And
Oh, that's awesome.
that's what we're working on right now. But
It's exciting. It really is cool to see people operationalize these ideas, and it not to be a corporation like the small world networks. It's they have so much power, and people don't really use them. They're still kind of in the old-fashioned mindset of,
yeah,
um, especially in the wisdom community. It's you need to be more practical, but not sacrifice your integrity in the process. So it's like this devilish dance. Um, but that's so cool. Yeah, because I've loved this stuff forever, and I've hired people and made tons of money digitally, doing arbitrage and stuff, and uh, yeah, that there's a if you there's a type of person like you maybe that's creative and that can see the opportunity and then turn it into something. And we've never had more like digital opportunity. Like, it's
yeah.
just
Now is the
constantly.
time. This is the time. This is a very revolutionary period.
It could be, yeah, it very much could be. It could end up being like
Yeah, it
the
could go.
government figures it out, and the big companies figure it out first. I was thinking of this
Yeah,
guy.
or China could take over the world digitally.
Yeah, they're
They're
interested.
trying. They're trying. They're clearly.
China's funny because they're so resourceful, and they used to be anti-capitalist, and that actually kept them small. But now they're open to capitalism and tech and stuff, and they've never been more dangerous, um, than they have been, because they used to be so closed. People were afraid of them, but if you actually watch them, they were kind of like this. like Israel. Israel's not trying to grow; they just don't want to disappear. They were very protectionist, but now they've totally flipped, and they're like, "Oh, we could be the world power. How do we manipulate the world?" And they're investing in like Africa and Europe, and it's kind of scary. The We're lucky that we have Japan so close to them and other places because they definitely do not trust the Chinese. But like, if not for some skeptics in like Europe and Japan, China's ready to erupt. Like they don't want to, and they have the capital and the military and the
It's kind
strategies
of
and
good
stuff.
that I feel sorry for Mongolia in between China and Russia.
Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mongolia at least has Russia to protect them and China to protect them from each of the others.
Well, yeah, and part of China's like strategy is to have like tons of influence on every adjacent country. And so not only are they trying to like basically become indispensable to all the economies of the world, but kind of like the way Russia and NATO and whatever the Russian version is, like control your neighbors and then the world. And China wasn't doing that up until not even that long ago. They were
Yeah.
much more
Isolationist.
internal.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which was nice for us, but now they've flipped. And yeah, it was bad enough just to be like a Chinese citizen, but now they're really on
Yeah. Well, it's
the
good that
buyer's
India is
market.
also growing. 'Cause
India is really interesting, right? Because they're almost like so chaotic that goodness can pop out of them. Like they have a lot of corruption too and a lot of
yeah,
bottlenecks,
politics
but
is weird in India, but the civilization there is as old as the Chinese one.
yeah, yeah.
And
Older
it's,
really in a lot of
yeah, and
China's really 100 years old, the most modern version of it.
right, but I mean, like the Confucian Taoist mode of being in China has been pretty stable. The culture of China has been pretty stable for thousands of years,
Yeah.
not counting the communism. But but India also has had a continuous culture. Both of them, for thousands of years, have been fairly continuous cultures.
Mm,
Cultural
mm,
mindset. So even though the politics is changing and weird and everything,
oh,
these are
that's
two stable cultures for the
yeah, yeah.
longest period of time. And they're both growing into the modern era and becoming very powerful. And so at least India is not as imperialistic and
Not
threatening
at all.
as
Yeah, yeah.
China is. But I think that's a part of the fact that India has been a laboratory for spiritual psychotechnologies from day one.
India's cool. Yeah, they're a much more eclectic, diverse bunch where China is much more communal in their thinking. They're much more top-down communal.
Collectivist, yeah.
Yeah, collectivist. Yeah. India will try out new things in different places. And they have like some amazing car company billionaires. And there's a really good pizza place that started in India. So they're much more experimental with like
Yeah.
uh, pro-social things.
I have a bunch of friends in India, philosophers and also just spiritual folks.
Yeah.
My
I
best
like that there's a difference between those two.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there are Indian philosophers who I'm friends with. Most of them are philosophical counselors.
Uh-huh.
Not all of them. But yeah, my best friend has been an expat over there. He's been going to India since we were teenagers and spending like a half a year there.
Oh, you told me about him. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I know a bunch of these spiritual community people who are back and forth to India or living there for a few years or whatever. But yeah, it's just an interesting. I haven't been there yet. I almost went
Oh,
in
really? It's
in January. Yeah, I was invited to a conference as a keynote speaker, and then they canceled it being live. They made it go online because at the time COVID was still a problem back in January over there.
yeah, yeah. India is interesting. Their economy has such a lower class. They have like just a massive lower class that creates really, and they're so big too. Like they'll have a fireworks parade and it'll just like destroy the air quality because 8 million people lit off fireworks that weren't supposed to. Like they're just it's such a like a wild west.
The pollution in the cities there, people have to wear masks, and
Right, yeah.
yeah,
It's
it's a shame
yeah,
because it's such a natural place also. they have so many wildlife areas there that are like
Mm,
Africa, thousands of miles filled with, jungle. They still have all that stuff, and
yeah,
lots of
yeah.
lots of these almost Stone Age villages, practically.
Wow.
But now people there who have cell phones and whatnot, in this ancient way of living with, you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like you ever watch like on YouTube the traffic videos where there's just like
oh my
80
God.
guys on bikes and
Yeah, they're all
cars
going
swirling,
which way, and they're
and
used to
it works.
that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
they're used to. Yeah, it's
It's the
crazy.
exact opposite. We're like we make they make us look orderly, like the way the Germans make us look orderly. Like we're so they're so chaotic and comfortable with
Yeah,
the
yeah. The
chaos.
traffic pattern over there reminds me of why the Americans beat the British in the before Independence Day here. The British soldiers were very orderly, and the
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. They were like, we now drum, and then we packed, and then we aim, and then like guerrilla snipers were just demolishing them. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, this has been fun chatting, Rick. I'm glad we
yes,
got to hang out a little bit and catch up.
likewise. Thank you for your
Yeah,
help with the tech stuff.
yeah, I mean it too. Like sincerely,
Yeah,
if you want me to help you
I
do
probably will
more,
get back to you. I'll do what I can, and I'll say I couldn't figure this out, Robert. Help me.
I enjoy it. It's kind of creative and relaxing to me. Like that's half of why I do the YouTube stuff is it's just personally rewarding. So um yeah, and when you want to start recording for your book, I keep reading. That's an excellent
Oh, you're
volume.
reading it right now. Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. I love it. It's like so information dense in ways that I can't translate into use. So it's more of like the novelty of it's fun because I'm not like, oh, I have so many practices, as you know. Like I'm trying to restrain my practices rather than but it's awesome. It's like such a different entity than existed before in that it's just so accurate and high quality where I think I told you once like I did a lit review on meditation research less than a decade ago, like 8 years ago, and it was like the wild west, even just trying to get like a few terms that you could like be
Oh,
confident about. And yours is like, no, I know the American founders of these, and I've been into this my whole life, and I also love logic and rigor, and it's such a you can just trust what you're reading. It's such a different thing than trying to like figure out what the last 100 meditation studies were talking about. It's really a high quality. It's yeah, it's just an amazing book.
oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah, have you gotten any awesome feedback from other people, or how's uh,
Oh,
any heard any cool stuff?
anybody who's taken a look at it seems to love it. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, we'll
It's
see.
cool. Yeah, I was talking to Arthur today, and like I asked him what young researchers should be caring about, and he said consciousness. And even the way he was talking about meditation, I think would gel with your. I didn't want to get too off topic. Oh, I know this guy is awesome, um, but it's kind of cool to see convergence among religious scholar that's really interested in this and kind of the quality level again. It's going up so quick. It's just need to get the imaginal to have that high quality. It's still in like the land of the lost with Young and Corban and stuff. But if that literature got as
Yeah,
rigorous as yours, that would be awesome.
it's a it's a it's a huge project. Did you see the typologies of meditation interview with Bruce and Lehman that I did
I
recently?
started it. No, I've watched about 10 minutes of it. Yeah.
Okay, so by the time you get to the end of that, you'll realize just how complex the project of uniting analytic philosophical analysis with all these different meditative practices and philosophies. It's a huge project.
You're kind of perfect for it because you can't talk well about meditation if you don't have a lot of experience in
Right.
probably at least 3 or 4 different traditions. If you're even only in one tradition, you tend to over bias and discount things you shouldn't be discounting. There's something really unique going on
Yeah.
in your
Not just me, but Bruce and Lehman.
well, yeah, Layman's also great, and I don't know Bruce as well, but yeah, I get the same sense from him. Yeah, Layman is so open and smart and just learns by trying, or learned by trying, that he's able to say with a first person experience, like, oh no, this is the commonality, or these are the differences. Where if I'm just an academic researcher looking at it from the third person view, even if I'm really intellectually honest, I'm going to make so many mistakes in my categorization and my assessment that it ends up like distorting the truth in such a major way. It takes someone that's like a really good thinker and who's tried a lot for a long time, which is like not a lot of people. It really winnows down the, yeah, layman would be great to
Well,
play
you'll
the
see by the
chapter.
time you get through that interview, all the different ways in which we, the three of us, realize that trying to say what meditation is and then classify different kinds of meditation, it's so problematized. We go through so many different dimensions of why it's difficult to do this and what we would have to do in order to be doing it right, and all the ways that we could be doing it wrong, and all the different misconceptions that people have and how they need to be sorted out, and what kinds of research would need to be done for us to have a comprehensive account of what meditation is.
Yeah,
And that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, because we say, okay, there's this category, there's that category, there's this problem, there's that problem. And then, without that awareness, you have to make an awareness of all the dimensions of a field
right.
and its problematics for you to then integrate it,
Right, to get to the shared grammar, to
right.
get to a good, and it's like that's what I loved about this guy Arthur, is like he values Buddhism and can intelligently compare it to like other forms of Western mysticism, and he knows about, like, he doesn't use the word prayer recklessly, and says, oh no, there's contemplation, no, there's this and that, and it takes someone so subtle to not miss that, and like inch it forward, because it's awesome. Like even in prayer, if you take someone like John's not interested in prayer, but there's forms of prayer that can learn so much from Buddhism, and there's people that are maybe interested in Buddhism that could also be learning from these esoteric cloud of unknowing types. But it takes someone that's really like able to dance between the two to show everybody that that's actually like a through line or whatever. um and again, like for someone like me that wants to be an amateur, and I was talking to someone the other day that like they have 40 years of experience and they just want to have a healthy practice, they're bombarded by all of the language, and I think you guys said at the beginning, like top 7 types of meditation, top 5 types, top 12 types, and there's no way to grapple with it, right? Like you can't just read all 10 articles and synthesize it, because they're all like aliens
Yeah.
talking foreign languages. So yeah, I love what you're doing. I think it's
Yeah. A lot of what
unique.
you read is branding, that people are ultimately trying to sell something.
Right. And no one knows. Like I talk to people in the gym. I was doing a yoga practice, and the guy's like, oh, what are you doing? That looks pretty cool. And he started saying like chakras, and I'm like, oh, my teacher would not like that word. Let's not even bastardize this system by just labeling it, oh, that's just like Neoplatonic Christian chakras. And he's like, that's gonna confuse us down the road. Like let's be really tight with our like the way John does. John's very particular with the way he speaks. And you again, like I love, even without knowing what you're saying all the time, I love how logical you are. Like your ability to be consistent uh is very high quality. Like we talked about the LSAT, and it's like not making those kind of classic logical mistakes is that would be a fun AI to make, that just scans academic papers for logical fallacies and it's like, oh, argument by metaphor, attacking the author. Uh,
We hope to have
so
a whole fallacy detection algorithm thing, which I'm going to be the guy who has to do a lot of the, you know,
I learned so much
work on
teaching
that.
that for the LSAT. Yeah, just like learning, oh yeah, there's like even the difference between plausible and probable and possible, and then the common traps, and that's kind of how marketing seduces you. It's just like, oh, you don't know the fallacies? I'm gonna just hijack your stories and your drives and get you to sign up to Facebook or whatever.
Yeah, my first philosophy teacher at Brooklyn College when I was an undergrad, he taught a reasoning class. It was like intro to reasoning. It was like logic light, like practical logic,
Yeah, yeah, critical
informal
reasoning, critical
logic,
thinking.
and was mostly about fallacies, informal
Hmm.
fallacies like ad hominem and red herring and
Yeah, yeah.
straw man and all that kind of stuff. And he said that he went to grad school with a guy who became a lawyer. He had like a master's degree or something in philosophy, but then went on to get a JD and became a lawyer. And they met up years later, and the lawyer friend of his said that the most valuable book that he ever used and that he still uses, and he uses it to kind of persuade people on juries and whatnot, was called 51 Fallacies.
Yeah, yeah. I love learning about logic. It's so powerful
Yeah,
when it's
but just
taught
being
well.
able to spot fallacies and identify them, you don't have to call them by name. You just have to point out what's logically wrong with that reasoning, right? Like, it doesn't matter who made the claim. The claim is either true or false, right? That's something you might say in response to an ad hominem argument,
Uh-huh.
whatever. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
lawyer said that those skills made him an excellent litigator, being able to spot fallacies.
That's what's so fun about you learn that stuff and then you go, oh, I can reason better, and I'm not trapped by people's words and persuaded by bullshit. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I love about people that care about ethics. Ethics is such a, like, the what are you, a fool? What do you believe in ethics, you idiot? What are you, just a, like, a fool? But when you actually go like, oh, this whole thing is running on integrity. Like, we're living in a social world that is the result of our own integrity and the integrity of, like, our grandparents or something.
Yeah.
And when you start not falling for nonsense and you actually start, like, then you can start thinking clearly and say, no, if this is true, then that means this is true, we should go that way, instead of, like, being in this house of mirrors that we're in, where you're just constantly trading a greater evil for a lesser. And it's
Yeah, this is what Socrates was dealing with the
yeah, yeah,
sophists.
exactly,
The sophists believe that it's all about rhetoric and who can make the better sounding argument,
right, yeah,
persuade people, because they didn't believe in truth.
right, they're the complete relativists, yeah,
Yeah. So, but this is the sentence that I remember. I don't know. I don't remember where I got it, but I've used it many times.
great, yeah.
Huge difference between an argument that sounds good and a sound argument.
Even just a sound argument, I remember learning that and going like, oh, that's cool. And even John talks a lot about plausibility, and that's really what his whole series is. People that love his series,
Yeah.
he's just taking the most common alternative, giving it a fair case, and then arguing better than it, and then giving the next most plausible popular thing, giving it a fair case, and then pointing out its flaws, and then offering an alternative. And then he builds it into your, like, I love John Vervaeke. There is a meaning crisis. We all need to be virtuous or whatever. Like, and and if you're always kind of in that relativistic world we live in, where it's okay to do that, just don't do it in a high degree, or if you're doing a lot, do it a little less, and you just kind of get thrown around in this nonsense. But as soon as you go like, oh no, I'm gonna die one day. When I'm nice to people, they're nice back to me. I can foster virtue in myself. Then you can start to, like, then your decisions matter, and then your relationships matter, and ethics make a lot more sense when it's more about, like, who you're connected with and how you're acting in society in front of you, rather than, oh, it's some argument off in space and then we forget about it and we all go back to Applebee's and eat our chicken sandwiches or whatever. um yeah, I think it's funny because I don't think I've ever been like a complete nihilist, but I love I love virtue. It's such a like, it is a you see why justice is such a major theme in throughout Plato's writings, because
And
if you have
wisdom,
internal justice, well, yeah, wisdom is justice in a lot of ways, and um,
wisdom is the meta virtue that calibrates the appropriate amount of every other character attribute or trait toward the good, the true, and the beautiful. Wisdom is the one. So every single other virtue that you have requires an element of wisdom. Wisdom is the orienting element which says that's too much of X, that's too little of X. This is where X is. It's right around here. This is the sweet spot, right? Between too much fear and too little fear, that's courage, for example, right? Wisdom is that discernment. It's in every single other virtue. And so I'm preaching Socrates right now.
no, this is great. Discernment is so interesting and under talked about. Yeah.
Socrates sees wisdom, and so does Plato, as the top virtue. It's the virtue that integrates all the other virtues.
Right. No, discernment is so interesting.
Yeah, and it's the unity of all the virtues. They're all united in wisdom. Every single one of them has at its core wisdom about that particular type of behavior or character attribute. That's my analysis of it. And then, so if you have wisdom, then you have to know that every other virtue is good because it shares in wisdom. And wisdom is always better than ignorance or foolhardiness or foolishness or stupidity or ignorance, right? And so it follows logically, but also intuitively and organismically, if you have wisdom, that the good is good, that every single virtue is good, and that possessing these perfections of character will not only make you flourishing, enjoying well-being, happiness, integrity, self-worth, all those other things, but your interactions with others, they're other yous, and we're social beings. So it just makes sense to be a well-ordered individual, like in Plato's state-soul analogy, right? A society can't thrive unless all of its individuals have wisdom, and the structure of society has to be wise as well. And they're both interdependent. You can't have one without the other. I mean, of course you can, but not sustainably.
Right.
Right. So wisdom.
Right, everything matters. Then all of a sudden you go from like a nihilistic worldview to an incredibly purposeful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you reflect back on periods of your life where you were lost, confused, nihilistic, depressed, whatever it is, isolated, whatever, you can see why you were. It was because you lacked that understanding. And we're born kind of ignorant, and
right, you don't know. Yeah, there's no like
feel our way around. And even if reincarnation or recollection or anamnesis or whatever Plato called it, even if all that, it still takes some time to recollect and figure things out and understand. It takes a lot of we're the kinds of beings, unlike the animals that are not human, right, for whom our existence and our purpose and our nature are not obvious to us. It takes us some time to figure out what the hell we are and why we're here and how we ought to live. We can live in harmony or out of harmony, unlike giraffes and deer and turtles. Their nature is set, and it's okay. They eat other animals and they get eaten by other animals, but in between those two things, they're just living their lives out naturally, right? Because they don't have this metacognitive ability to say, wait a second, what?
Yeah, we're smarter than our animal brains realize, so we can act kind of ignorantly and then reflect upon that and grow. Yeah, self-reflection is so interesting. You just made me think quite a bit about the value of reflecting upon even why people get caught up in over reflecting on their tragedies. You get caught in a trauma and then almost relive it, but it's almost like a maladapted version of what you're saying. It's like, oh, the brain wants to discern the wisdom to avoid that, and instead of doing it consciously, it's just doing it unconsciously and being in this trap.
So there's something right about existentialism in terms of the burden of our free will is on us, and the burden of our ignorance in a way. We have to kind of pay attention as we go along. And even, I think John has said this in some of his talks, I forget where, but maybe not just John, but somewhere in the liminal web, I'm starting to use all these voices like, you know, but like almost any positive process, any virtue can turn into a vice, I think it might have been this actually, it was Layman talking
Yeah.
to that woman who has the Inquire app. I forget her name, Jill, Jill something or other, about Gurdjieff.
Okay.
I think that was the interview where,
I haven't seen it.
yeah, any kind of psychotechnology can turn into a vice
Hmm.
if, if, like you just said, it's not applied properly or it's over applied or, you know, our habit system kind of co-ops it in a way. So we've got some kind of parasitic processing thing that
Hmm.
captures the psychotechnology and just, we have to be on the lookout for
Hmm.
ways in which our system malfunctions, no matter, and this, I would
That's why
imagine.
mindfulness is so powerful, because they
Well,
become we build a habit of mindfulness. Well, that's what mindfulness is, because we work really hard to build a habit, and then we chunk it down to the sub propositional and let it run. And if you like something that was really adaptive, crying for milk or whatever becomes like, oh, you're so annoying as an adult. uh, so this thing that was really adaptive, if it's not monitored and pulled out and updated and reintegrated, um, so that's why mindfulness is almost like this meta mode or something. It's not like a virtue, but it's like a process that can capture the maladaptiveness in motion. uh,
yeah, self-reflection,
right, that's what gets Achilles out of his tent. And uh,
self-analysis, yeah, periodic review.
honest friendships, just having friends that say like, dude, what's wrong with you? Or like, someone told me that the average man in the US has zero friends right now. You and I both love friends and have lifelong friends and stuff like that. And I hadn't thought about, I was like, I'd never heard that, and didn't, I know people are pretty lonely, but I hadn't really heard like, that's a huge source of self-reflection. When you see your friend doing something that you're also doing, but you look down on them and you're like, what are they doing? Then you, oh, I'm doing that too, we should both change. Or they tell you things, like you lose so much feedback in the, if you don't have friends, if you don't have relationships. uh,
Yeah, two things. I think I might have said this. I did say this in my interview with Lehman and Bruce, but maybe also elsewhere. I was co-teaching a class at Vassar College with a professor of religion who's a friend of mine from my first spiritual community. Ram Dass, Hilder, and our original teachers. But so we're friends. We co-taught this course on contemplative ethics. And so we were teaching about Buddhism and Hinduism and this and sages and Lao Tzu and this one and that one and enlightened beings, it came up as models and archetypes and whatever. And, I don't remember the exact lesson, but one of the students once asked, how do you know if somebody's enlightened? And my friend, his name was Rick also, Rick Jarrow, he said, ask their spouse.
hmm
So it was very funny, but it was also
yeah.
quite insightful because somebody like some guru figure who goes out and gives a nice talk and leads a
Hmm.
meditation and gives advice and, chants with the students or whatever, that's performative. He's on stage, right?
Hmm.
But his or her spouse sees how they act when they break a dish or, that kind of thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
That's awesome.
the spouse knows whether or not the person is enlightened. And I remember going to a memorial service for Swami Satchidananda. I don't know if you know who he was.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, he's the founder of integral yoga, actually.
Oh wow.
And afterwards, a bunch of us, I was with a group of friends, but there were some friends of those friends who I didn't know, and we all went out to dinner. And it turned out that one of the women at the table was the wife of a Zen master who I knew, and I didn't know that they were
Mm.
married. And I had a lot of respect for this Zen master. When I found out that she was married to him, I said, "Oh, what is it like being married to, Zen master?" And she just rolled her eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, he is not really enlightened."
Yeah, because if you're mindless towards your closest relationships, because you take them for granted and
Yeah.
expect them to be kind of subservient to you or whatever the dynamic
There's,
is.
there's these divisions within us. Like my philosophy students might think, "Oh, he's so sage-like or something," but
Uh-huh.
my wife doesn't think that, because she sees how easily I can lose my cool. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it's the same kind of thing. So it's like the way that Layman put a nice spin on it was, okay, we were joking about having a brainoscope to tell if people are really in a nirvana state, right?
Yeah.
Future neuroscience will be able to know what's going
Hmm.
on, right? So we said, well, that's one way of finding out. The other one is a spouse. That might be easier. We don't have to wait for the technology. You just ask the spouse, is that person enlightened? No, they're quite evolved, but they're not enlightened. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. It's like if you're the advice of if you're on a date, watch how the date treats the waiter, not how they treat you, right? Because they're like, oh, whatever. You just
right.
saw into the your future.
That's
Uh,
right. Exactly
yeah.
right. So this kind of interpersonal mirroring,
Mm.
interpersonal reflection, the other is another self. Like you were saying, having friends, real friends, superficial friends agree with you all the time because they just want to keep
Hmm.
your friendship, whatever, right? But a real friend will say, "The fuck's been going on with you lately, Rick? You know, is everything okay at home?
Yeah, yeah.
Or whatever, or on the flip side, as John Vervaeke once said to me in one of my interviews with him, when people tell him, you seem to have changed in a good way,
Yeah, yeah, that's a
right?
really good
Yeah,
heuristic.
this kind of thing.
Um,
So this
mm,
interpersonal feedback, a friend is another self who can see you in ways that you don't see yourself or that you might be blinding yourself to seeing, whether it's conscious, unconscious, willful, semi-conscious.
yeah, well, like you stop looking, like we're such novelty seekers that as soon as we have something figured out, we stop paying attention to it the same way. And if you're super mindful to your like fans or your guru disciples, but then you're just a schmuck in these places, you're definitely like
And that
carrying all this
also,
karma.
yeah, and that's that spiritual, non-spiritual dichotomy. I've had so many friends in spiritual communities who, when they're around the guru and when they're around the satsang, the other devotees or whatever, they all speak a certain way and they wear their,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
their rosary beads, their mala and, their peace sign
That's
earrings.
why it's so confusing. Yeah.
And they eat their vegan food in front of you and all
Yeah.
that. But then, like, that's like people when they're religious when they go to church on Sunday, but then during the week they're gangsters. It's the same kind of partitioning of the self, right?
Hmm.
Having this dichotomy. Oh, this is spiritual, this is not. And this is the same thing with business ethics, right? Oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the first time I taught business ethics, it was at Brooklyn College, and there's a large Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn that feeds a lot of students into the accounting and all those other business programs at Brooklyn College, and then they had to take business ethics, right? So here I am, first time I'm teaching business ethics, and on the very first day, I started talking about what business ethics was, and like these Orthodox Jewish kids in the back, very smart, they're very smart because they study the Talmud and all that, which is highly
Yeah,
philosophical,
yeah, yeah.
reading and reading. But they're like, this is Jewish business ethics is like kosher ham. There's no such thing,
Well,
right?
that's what's so scary. Yeah, like Lao Tzu says it so well, like cleverness. Like you don't want to be clever. and that cleverness in your familial life or in your yeah, I mean, like I think that's having that dissonance has made me want to change a bunch of bad habits, because I have these really rich relationships with people like you, and then I go to Chick-fil-A and gorge or whatever, or
I
you
like
start to,
Chick-fil-A.
well, that's what's so complicated about our societies. We're so complex that if you're not paying attention, you can have like five personalities that really actually don't gel. And that's part of the beauty of like simplicity, is actually it pulls you out of all that bullshit to um, not have to worry about being duplicitous or hypocritical. Because I mean, that's like Christ, every time he makes a reference to vipers, is talking about hypocrites. And it's honest, it's like one of the cool things about the New Testament is it's so harsh to hypocrites, the same way Plato is so harsh to the sophists, right? Like that's a subtle, animals aren't hypocrites to keep up the animal theme.
Right.
They have that simple animal life where they're always turtles. But we can actually be so self-deceiving or so complex that we don't even realize how hypocritical we are. Um,
We divide ourselves from ourselves. We partition ourselves. Maybe, and then that's what the extreme version of that is, multiple personality disorder.
right. Or like our
Bernardo,
shadow. Yeah.
Bernardo Kastrup talks about that.
Does he really?
Yeah, well, he uses it as a model for idealism, not being idealistic, but the non-materialism, the view that everything is mind, right? So he says, well, look, we know from empirical studies of the brain of people undergoing split personality disorder that literally when one personality is present, one part of the brain is active. When the other personality takes over,
Yeah, yeah,
another
yeah.
part of the brain is active. And like, we could do lie detector tests, and when we're talking to that part, they don't remember what that
Yeah,
part,
yeah, yeah.
like we've established that this is a genuine phenomenon. There are really separated.
Wow, and yeah, it's not even like unconscious bullshit. It's like totally ripped apart
They're,
from the
they're
ego.
literally partitioned. They are
Yeah.
compartmentalized. They don't communicate with each other. And he says this is a model for the view of what do you call non-dualism, that we're all one mind, but we're all partitioned from each other. So I'm partitioned from you in this way, but we're really all one mind, according to the idealism that he advocates, Bernardo Kastrup. I don't know if you ever saw the debate between him and John.
Parts of it. It's so academic
It
that
was on
yeah,
theories of everything. Yeah, it got pretty abstract.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but okay, so that's a weird metaphysics, and I'm not so sure if it's true. I'm inclined to.
Yeah, I'm okay with us having separate bodies.
Yeah. Well, the Neoplatonism thing is that everything is one fundamentally, but the differences are also real. There's one and
The
there's
many, yeah, like the which is, it's not the credo, is it, where they have the argument of like all one, all many, and then they kind of synthesize at the end that you need both, and it's very paradoxical.
I'm
And
not sure. No, that's not in the Credo. The
okay.
Credo it might be in the Parmenides.
No, I haven't gotten there yet, so it's definitely not that one. Or
Oh,
it might be there as well, but we had a really good
well,
talk.
Parmenides is all about the one, that there's only a one. In any event,
But the like it is subtle, like the one within difference, and how one can be both uh unified and have differentiation if all is one.
I know it's a puzzle.
Well, but then it makes you think about types though, and it's maybe it's more of like the it's subtle and like non-localized, the same way hyper objects are like real but happen at different points in time and
You know,
at
I've
different
heard this. I've
spaces.
heard John talk about hyperobjects, and I've heard a couple of other of his friends, like Greg Enriquez and whatever. Explain to me